This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there. Jeff CUtastrophe welcoming you to another sports catastrophe birthday boy. No. It's not a boy, it's a girl. And a famous girl at that. Her name is Sue Barker. Yes, people in the UK will know about Sue Barker because, she's a CBE, companion of the British Empire. And she, at one time, was the host of the famous sports quiz show, A Question of Sport, at the time. But she isn't anymore. But people will remember that Sue Barker is a sports presenter for the BBC, with coverage of the Wimbledon Tennis Championships and basically being the first one to interview the winners of the Wimbledon titles, as I witnessed in the 90s and 2000s. But what people don't know about Sue Barker is she used to be a very decent tennis player. She's 66 years old, if you must know, but Sue Barker won 15 WTA Tour events, and won the 1976 French Open. Anyway, she was once number 3 in the world. Can you believe that Sue Barker was the number 3 tennis player in the world? And the British and all that. Her best job at the Grand Slams, she got to semis in 75 and 77, failed, won the French Open, semis in 77, got to there, and the fourth round in the US Open in 76. She was actually educated at a convent school in Devon and got tennis coaching from someone who actually would coach Angela Mortimer to a couple of Grand Slam titles. Roberts would help Barker's forehand become the most admired weapon in the world and all that. Anyway, Barker did okay. At age 16, she would be signed to the IMG, or the International Management Group, which tennis people. At age 17, there was a townhouse in Newport Beach, California. She would actually be coach at the John Wayne Tennis Club, and were neighbors. And had neighbors such as Rod Laver, the Australian Red Rocket. Anyway, Sue Barker got to the Grand Slam semi in 75 at the Australian Open, but in 1976 she won the French Open. The worst part about it is that she never got to any more Grand Slam finals. All that. So the 76 French Open was huge and all that, especially for Sue Barker. Chris Evert, who was the two-time French Open champion, did not want to defend her title for some reason. She decided to go into the pathetic World Team Tennis. Well, some people said World Team Tennis is kind of pathetic. And would not come back to France until 1979. Sue Barker was actually seeded number 1. I guess because of her past experience and all that. So she took down Gregory of Australia, Pereira of Espagne, Romania's Sibidescu, and Marcikova of Czechoslovakia to get to the semifinals, where she would take on. Well, she was the only one of the seeded players. There were 8 seeded players, and Barker was the only seeded player to make the semifinals. She took down the Romanian Virginia Rusitsky in 3 sets, facing off against Renata Tomanova. And beat Renata 6-2, love 6-2 to win the French Open. So Sue Barker got to the Wimbledon semifinal, and she was the second semifinal. She was in the second semifinal against Betty Stuve of Holland. It looked like it was going to be a dream matchup in 1977. Virginia Wade versus Sue Barker at Wimbledon, both British ladies tennis superstars in the year of the Queen's Silver Jubilee, 25 years on the throne. Unfortunately, Barker lost the semifinal and didn't watch the final, which Virginia Wade did win for all of England. She would have an injury-plagued 78 year in 1978, and then she came back a little bit. So she would win 15 singles and 12 doubles titles and all that. So yeah, she tried her best. Winning 15 titles. She would win in Surbiton, Bastad, Kitzbühel, I guess that's Austria, Adelaide, Australia, Auckland, New Zealand, Hamburg, Germany, French Open in Paris, San Francisco, Dallas, Brisbane, Australia, Manchester, England, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Sydney, Australia, and Brighton Beach. She would win no titles on Canadian soil. So yeah, it's Grand Slam. She tried her best and all that, but only got to one final, and that was the 1976 championship. So when she retired, she became a commentator and reporter for Australia's Channel 7 in 1985 before going on to Sky to become the anchor of tennis coverage for 3 years. Barker would join the BBC Wimbledon coverage in 93 and took over host of Today at Wimbledon 94. And since 2000, she's the anchor of the 2-week-long broadcast for BBC. Obviously, because, it's in England. It's the biggest thing around. Barker branched out in a lot of things. And, she was the host of the BBC Sports Personality of the Year Awards for many years, would host BBC sports coverage of the four majors. The Grand Slam. The French, the Wimbledon, the US Open, and the Aussie Open. She actually hosted the Grand National for many years, racing at Ascot, horse racing, World Athletics Championships, Commonwealth Games, Summer Olympics, and Winter Olympics for the BBC. She was actually the co-presenter for the coverage of Prince Edward, who was the Queen and Prince Philip's youngest child, to Sophie Rhys-Jones, all that. Barker actually introduced Rhys-Jones to Queen Elizabeth II's youngest son at a function. So, she did a lot of things. So yeah, she did her job and all that. Barker broke off an engagement with Australian tennis player Sid Ball. That's funny. All that. She would have a relationship with Greg Norman, where she met, and then she met Cliff Richard and all that. It was amazing because Cliff Richard was a legendary singer and all that. Cliff Richard almost wanted to marry Sue Barker, but he couldn't go through with it and all that. Barker would settle in 1980 and married a landscape gardener, Lance Tankert. Yeah, so basically, Barker did her job. Wasn't really married. I don't think she had kids, which is weird. But the biggest thing about Sue Barker is she was a fan of. She was one of the best around. It was called A Question of Sport. It's one of these great BBC sports uh, game shows and all that. If you remember back early in April, I did something on Linford Christie, and I also took the time to add on about stuff about They Think It's All Over. So They Think It's All Over and Question of Sport were basically rivals in the TV sports quiz thing. It's the world's longest TV sports quiz because it's run nonstop since 1978, which is more than 4 decades. So anyway, Question of Sport had David Blind first, and then it was the legendary David Coleman who came in and did it from 1979 to 1997. And then Sue Barker took over for Coleman in 1997. So they had lots of specials and all that about the 50th anniversary of Question of Sport and all that. The rounds were huge. The picture board where 12 number squares revealed the sports person to be identified during a 1-minute round. the 1 minute round, sports action about a montage of sporting action, and contestants were asked questions about it. An observation round where they have to observe things, all that. A mystery guess, home or away, which they can answer a home question for 1 point or an away question for 2 points. The buzzer round and the sprint finish. So anyway, it was amazing and all that. But they would also have captains. Like Sue Barker would be the presenter, and then each team would have a captain. There were legendary captains. All that. Legendary rugby player Bill Beaumont was a captain. Ally McCoist was a captain at one time. Matt Dawson was a captain from 2004 to 2021, which was amazing. Ian Botham had a good 8-year career. Former cricketer and now and was captain. Phil Tufnell in 2021. From 2008 to 2021 was captain on Question of Sport too. So they would have a lot of people. Emmeline Hughes and Ally McCoist, both soccer players, were captains at one point. But the current presenter is Patty McGuinness in 2021, after Sue Barker was released and all that. Ugo Monye, who was a former rugby union international star, and Sam Quake, who's a field hockey legend for the UK, winning the title in 2016, became the guys in Question of Sport and all that. Question of Sport had some famous moments in which Emmeline Hughes in 1987 thought that Princess Anne, who was an equestrian superstar and part of the 1976 Olympics in Montreal for the UK, was John Reed, the jockey. Princess Anne would actually appear on the 200th episode, and basically Emmeline Hughes was beside himself because Princess Anne would be a panelist on the show. And Princess Anne's daughter, Sarah Phillips, who followed in her mom's footsteps to be an equestrian at the Olympics, was also in there too. Sue Barker's have been called Ray Clements and Alan Minter and Dennis Taylor. But one of the most notable moments from A Question of Sport was a picture board that led to letters on the board. And there were 2 letters up on the board. And former, what was he? Former Irish rugby union player and coach Paul O'Connell saw 2 letters and found the blanks on everything. See if he had everything personal, because I know he did that one. Nope, they don't talk about it. But Paul O'Connell saw 2 letters, and then he correctly said the name of the sports team: Borussia Mönchengladbach. Borussia, Bourussia, Bo Russia, and Mönchengladbach, Mönchengladbach. So it was amazing how he got it right on the nose. It's like one of the most unbelievable moments in Question of Sport history. Question of Sport will always be decent, but they think it's all over. It's number 1 in my heart because of Gary Lineker, and don't you forget about that. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.